Dinky Doors.
If you're just joining us, you'll maybe not know that we're on an unexpected mission to save the world. Our previous reconnaissance video scouted the location for our next Dinky Door target. Roll on blank tapes. And this is the door the Supreme Leader requested we open. Or something like that. The Supreme Leader isn't much of an artist. So what we actually ended up making looked a bit different. And in this video, we'll show you exactly how we made it. Rightio! I started by drawing and printing a template to help get the size right. This wasn't a final design, just something to start with. I'm aiming for a door around 25 centimeters across and 28 high. That's about 10 by 11 inches. For the cassette tape, I needed a strong base, so I used some waste metal I found in a builder's skip. To make sure it was the right size, I time travelled back to my teenage years to grab a suitable antique. It has to stick out from the centre of the swirly portal at a jaunty angle, a bit like this. I'm also using this metal to provide a rigid support for the whole door, but this is a bit too small. Whoa, actually this is the original now, that's what I call music. M17, Duran Duran, Culture Club, Kajagoogoo, Paul Young, classic stuff. And this is perfect for the main structure. The holes make it easy to attach stuff to, and it should help provide a key when installing. A quick trim to make it manageable, and I can draw out the design. Snip snip! I flattened out the sheet and the sharp edges, and cut the metal to double the size of the cassette. I used my raw, unbridled strength to fold it in two, with only the help of a small metal block and a hammer. Next I bent in some flanges so it could sit flat against the larger sheet of metal. Now obviously cassettes have holes, so I marked where I needed to cut them, and used some snippers to cut the metal away. I used polymer clay, specifically Super Sculpey Original, to form the shape of the cassette. With a push, it gets into the holes easily, making for a solid structure. After a bit of smoothing with a butter knife and some sculpting tools, I had the basics of a cassette, and a rolling pin helped to create the thin strips for the bottom of the tape, which I gently pressed into position. Super Sculpey Original is soft, so it's important to keep reforming anything that gets distorted. I added the line details of the cassette carefully. I probably should have used a ruler to make them really straight, but it looks about right, slightly cartoony, which I think works. I baked the cassette for 30 minutes, shrouded in foil, with the oven set at 130 degrees Celsius, which is 275 Fahrenheit. With it baked, I worked out where I wanted to position it, and drew around the flanges on the main metal structure for easy reference. It's good practice to use foil to create the main bulk of the sculpture, so you can use less polymer clay. The thinner layer of clay bakes quicker and is also cheaper. I whacked the foil until it was holding its shape and relatively flat, then I used some wire, actually paper clips, to attach it to the metal support. And a quick whack of the hammer made sure the ends were out of the way and it was firmly in place. Once again, using heroic strength, I needed to bend the metal support structure to form the doorstep base. Using more scrumpled up foil and some persuasion from my hammer, I bulked out the shape of the steps and formed the stones around the arch. And then, time for some more Super Sculpey. I rolled out an even layer and squished it into the portal opening with the help of a butter knife. Pressing the clay into the metal formed a thin but very strong surface. I used a similar technique to secure the cassette in place. I added a ripple texture to the portal surface with some ball-ended tools and made finer swirls in the middle. Looking swirly. The paper blueprint was actually quite useful for making evenly sized shapes. Ah, tea, nectar of the gods! I made sure all the holes were filled and the surface was firm as I carved the stones into place. Adding surface texture and cracks makes the stone look believable. I wanted the portal to have some magical orbs, and these frosted aquamarine marbles were perfect. There was only one large marble in the pack, which was actually a natural fit for the top of the arch. I shaped 3 claws to hold the orb and then squished it carefully into place. It felt like it needed a further orb to add some extra magic, so I squished a hole into the clay for another marble. I added a bit more structure and some fine details around the orbs to make them blend in better. I wanted these to eventually look like metal instead of stone. When the Supreme Leader originally conceived this mystical portal to another world, they surely craved some cryptic runes, so I had to oblige. I know what they say, but do you? This is just before it goes into the oven again to cure the clay and make it less likely I'll accidentally damage it. I baked it again for 30 minutes at 130 degrees Celsius. Well, it's starting to look like a magical door, if a little pink. Next up was to roll out some more clay to fully cover the doorstep stones in preparation for adding some texture. With the stone texture done, the all-important Dinky door's seal of approval gets stamped into the clay. Ugh. Good stuff. I needed some stones to support 2 further orb pedestals, so I covered and textured some more foil either side of the portal. I used 2 screws to give the pedestals some support, covered them in clay and twisted them into place. 2 more marbles were sculpted onto the top of the pedestals in a flame-like setting. I also added a spike to the very top. It felt quite unbalanced without it, and this made it feel more ethereal and elegant. So this is the finished sculpture before the final bake. Crikey, I can't wait to get some paint on it. It looks oh so very pink and fleshy. Ugh. It's also a good time to give it a proper inspection to make sure there aren't any obvious fingerprints or tool marks. I could always cover any mistakes in the cured clay with some new stuff. All look good, so burn! 30 minutes. I like to put down a sheet of baking paper when painting. It protects the cutting mat and makes it easier to slow the sculpture around without touching it. I mixed titanium white, processed black and burnt umber acrylic paints to make a warm mid-grey colour that I could use as a base coat. I made sure to get an even covering for all of the stone parts. I then mixed the same paints into a darker but more watery mix to get into all of the cracks and crevices, and then used a damp cloth to wipe off most of it. To add depth, I loaded my brush with a warm grey acrylic, wiped off most of it until it was very dry, before then brushing onto the face of the stone. It gives a pretty convincing effect and returned the stone to a lighter colour overall. And here's the stonework finished. It looks splendid against the fleshy pink. I added a base coat of burnt umber to the parts I wanted to look metal, and then brushed over a rich gold acrylic, which because it's a little thinner, lets some of the burnt umber show through. I think the gold really pops against the aquamarine orbs and the neutral stone. Next I applied some more of the burnt umber for the fiddly bit of tape in the middle of the cassette, before applying a base coat of warm grey to the cassette body. I used pure titanium white for the cassette's label and wish my lines had been a bit straighter. I lightly mixed some bright green, manganese blue, wedgwood and some titanium white so I could make the swirly portal all kind of swirly. I could use the partially mixed combinations to add variety to the watery portal. Here's the painting so far, though that cassette still looks a little new for my liking, so time to give it a bit of grunge. I mixed the warm grey acrylic with a touch of black and watered it down so I could apply it as a wash into the cassette's details, before wiping most of it off again. I wanted the cassette to be a musical love letter, so wrote on a hormone-laden message from one shy teenager to another. For the B-side, I figured this might be a tape that had a previous life as a collection of fave raves, and was only now being repurposed for love. So maybe the evidence needs to be destroyed. Nearly done now, but I always wanted this Dinky door to glow. This is a phosphorescent pigment. It comes as a powder and you can mix it into pretty much anything that'll dry transparent. Under daylight it's white, but it turns a vivid sky blue colour when it gets dark. It's not radioactive and doesn't need UV light to glow. It's tricky to see with my camera setup, but with the lights turned off there's a bit of a blue glow. It's brighter in real life. I'm using an acrylic relief paste to help spread the powder. There weren't any instructions with it, so I'm experimenting with a ratio. I've kept it quite dry to try and keep some texture in the finished look. I certainly didn't want to entirely cover the watery colours of the portal, so I built up the amount of paste slowly. And there we go, done. I lost a bit of the colour from the portal, but I'm hoping the glow makes up for it. To protect it from the misery of the British weather, I applied a couple of thin coats of polyurethane in a matte finish. I did this outside so I didn't inhale too many fumes or stick myself to my desk. Ta-da! Done. With the construction complete, now comes the exciting part where we covertly release it into the wild. That'll be for our next video. I hope you enjoyed seeing how the door was made. But the really important bit is how it helps save the world. It's why we're doing it, after all. There's no obligation, but if you want help with our mission to save the world, you can find out all there is to know about our unexpected mission on our Patreon page. It's linked below. Of course, if you want to get notified, be sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel and hit the little notification bell. Splendid stuff. Thank you. You're lovely. Hello. Please subscribe. Bye.